Waheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Waheguru Ji Ki Fateh. Welcome to the Sikh Think Tank show. My name is Jeet Bains, and today we're joined by Navtej Singh Sangha from the Sikh Council UK. And today we're talking about what the Sikh Council UK is about, what their background is, and some of the current issues that they've been dealing with. So welcome, Navtej Singh, to the program. You're the Parliamentary Liaison Officer for the Sikh Council UK, is that right?
That's right, that's right. Firstly, thank you for having me on the show.
Oh, no, not at all.
Yeah, so I work as a Parliamentary Liaison for the Sikh Council.
Okay.
And I've been doing it for about 6 months so far.
So tell me about the Sikh Council UK.
Okay.
When did it start? What's the background to it? And what achievements have they made to date?
Okay. So the Sikh Council started around 2010, and it was launched kind of shortly thereafter, actually in Parliament itself. And the thinking behind the Sikh Council was that there's near enough 500,000 Sikhs in the UK, and despite all the successes of the Sikh community in business or in schooling, academia and the professions, we're actually not very well organised when it comes to talking to government or talking to the political parties, and as a result of that, we're not very well represented. So the Sikh Council is really there to try and bring some structure and some order and to coordinate how the various groups that are already in existence, how we work together to try and move forward on our shared common agendas.
So it's not in competition with any existing group, it's more of a brotherly working together approach.
Absolutely. So the way the Sikh Council is structured is, other Sikh organisations that are out there, be they Gurdwara or be they campaigning groups or whatever form they might take, they join the Sikh Council and they send a delegate, and then the structure of the party is made up of those delegates, and there's a democratic process whereby they vote up and they elect their leadership and their executive functions. So it's made up by all the organisations who have for years and years and years been campaigning for the Sikh community, and it's made up by them. So it's very democratic. It has, in that regard, a mandate to actually represent the Sikh community.
Yep.
And in terms of its size and its breadth of membership, it is by far the most representative organisation, with delegates representing Gurdwara and campaign groups from across the country.
Okay.
All the major Gurdwara are largely involved.
Right.
So it's a pretty comprehensive and broad organisation.
And so talk to me about some of the 2 or 3 biggest achievements they've had to date.
Right. Our attempt at trying to get involved with politics is something that we only started recently, and that's kind of where
and your role is a parliamentary liaison role.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So my role is to try and front some of the work and to try and build some of those relationships, both in government and with the parties. And it's important to make that distinction, because actually you have to adopt different strategies. So when you talk to government, civil servants, and when you talk to ministers in there who come from clearly a political party background. So some of the challenges we faced when we first started doing this work, were simple issues, like if the government wants to discuss or canvass the opinion of the Sikh community, they themselves didn't know who to talk to. So they often relied on personal relationships. So we had to try and work to convince people and demonstrate actually we are a democratic organisation and we are broad, and actually this is who our membership consists of.
And it's across all parties?
Oh, absolutely. So we work across parties. We'll engage with all political parties to try and forward our cause. And in terms of the kind of subjects we deal with, our focus is actually issues that Sikhs face here in the UK and in Europe. That's who we represent, and that's who the people who we try and work for. We don't try and stray too far from that.
Okay. And in terms of then progress on that front.
Okay.
The various parties, are they more engaged now, do you think, than in the beginning? Tell me about some of the things that's indicating that progress is being made.
Okay, one of the key kind of objectives is to actually put something in place where we are talking to the parties. I mean, there's several fronts to this. There's an element of are they talking to us in terms of when they're creating policy or when they're thinking about writing or amending government legislation or whatever it might be. And then there's a second element to this, which is how do we get more Sikhs involved with politics and with the parties? Because that's how you address the lack of representation, really.
Yeah.
It's about having the ability to feed Sikhs into the political parties so that they can succeed in normal, everyday, mainstream politics. But they also then happen to be well versed and they understand Sikhism and they understand some of the challenges and the concerns that the Sikh community have. That second area is the bit that really interests me. But of course, we do work on all the policy issues that tend to pop up.
Okay, so on that bit that you're in particular interested
Yes.
in,
Yep.
more engagement with
Yes.
political parties
Yep.
of whichever colour.
Yes.
Tell me a bit about what's happening next on
Okay.
that engagement front.
Okay. What we're actually doing is we're trying to structure a program whereby we begin engaging with the Sikh community firstly to identify, professional, very competent young Sikhs. When I say young, I'm talking, anyone sub 40, into their 40s actually, rather, who is, who has a professional background, who understands, who has an interest in politics. And what we're trying to do is get them to engage the Sikh Council through a program which we are currently putting together, and we're talking to all the main political parties. And the objective is to agree almost a pathway which allows us to take these people, young British Sikhs who are interested in politics, and feed them into the political system and give them some experience and the exposure that they'll need to develop. And as an outcome, we obviously want to, our ambition is to increase the number of candidates that the Sikh community has.
Okay. And just to be clear then on the point about young,
yes.
So there's no age limit as such?
No, absolutely not. I mean, it's just trying to change some of the demographics who we can be confident will actually have the skills needed to represent themselves, firstly, as savvy political operators, and actually succeed in politics, in mainstream politics,
Yep.
but then also be plugged in and aware of issues that matter to Sikhs, and act like good Sikh role models.
And so anyone watching this programme, if
Okay.
anyone was interested in, for whichever political party,
Yes.
if they were interested in working through the Sikh Council
Yes.
to find out about how they can get involved
Okay.
in politics and...
Yes, I can give you some more information on this. So the programme that we're about to launch, like I said, we have spoken to all the parties and we are agreeing a certain way of introducing Sikhs to them.
Yeah.
And the first event that we're having is actually going to be hosted by the Conservative Party. We have another event after that which will be hosted by the Labour Party. And we're also then have something in the pipeline with the Liberal Democrats. And what we're looking for is for people to come forward who meet the kind of criteria we've already discussed, and who have an interest in politics and would somehow like to get involved. That doesn't necessarily mean you want to be an MP. It could be that could be your ambition, or it could be you're interested in standing as a councillor. It could be you're interested in helping campaigning.
Yeah.
But anyone who wants to get involved in politics and has that kind of right level of experience and skills,
Yeah.
then we will be starting a campaign soon, asking them to send in their details, send in a CV, and there'll be a selection process.
And so, I mean, we'll put up information
Yes.
on the screen.
Okay.
What's the... where should people go to find out more information? Is there a website? Is there an email address that they could contact?
There is... the best thing to do is probably to drop an email at the moment to info@sikhcounciluk.org.
So that's info@sikhcounciluk.org.
sikhcounciluk.org, yep.
Yeah.
I believe that's... we have to double check that one.
Okay.
But if you send in your details and a CV, we will start publicising this actually next week, and there will be more information on what we need from you. And there will be a short selection process where you submit your information. There are, all these events are slightly limited in terms of how many people we can take.
Yeah.
So we will run everything through a filter, and these events will hopefully become regular, and it will give these guys an opportunity to meet senior figures in the political parties. It's an opportunity to go build your networks, and to start to get involved.
So, I mean, let's kind of emphasize the point here. It's really important for the Sikh voice to be heard by those who are in power, those who are in parliament. That's probably quite an obvious point. And from what you've seen, the representation is quite poor.
Yes.
In the work that you've been doing, what would you say is your feeling, or what have you gathered around how open the doors are, how willing they are to listen to the Sikh point of view? I'll cover two areas off there actually. In terms of how poorly we are represented, it is a real issue. There are 500,000 Sikhs in the UK, give or take. Yeah.
We are, in academic terms, we are one of the most successful groups by faith. In economic terms, we are actually the second most successful group by faith. In the professions, Sikhs are quite pioneering. They first judge, first other posts tend to be Sikhs.
Yep.
So we've been incredibly successful. Yet the position we find ourselves in today is we have one Sikh MP, and that really isn't, kind of where we should be.
And how, in terms of the parties, the various parties, are they quite open?
They are
willing to learn.
Absolutely, absolutely. So the overriding impression that I actually got was that the parties were never quite sure who to talk to. They're absolutely open. There is recognition of the values and the contributions that Sikhs have made, both historically to Britain. Yeah. So there's the kind of contribution to empire that everyone's pretty well aware of, and what they continue, the contributions we make today. So every party I've spoken to is quite keen to get involved and to get Sikhs engaged. The issue has been they just don't know who to talk to. And that's kind of, that was the thinking, and that was the impetus behind creating the Sikh Council. So I think we've opened those channels, we've demonstrated who we are, and now those relationships are there, and we're at a point where we're now actually structuring our pathways and our programs to actually get Sikhs involved. Good.
Okay, so really important work. We'll put up the correct information on the screen, but if you just look up Sikh Council UK, you should be able to find ways of contacting the Sikh Council.
Absolutely.
And the information will be available. If you're interested in getting into politics in a serious way, at the parliamentary level or at the local level, some good work has been done, and information will be made available for you to take that further. So let's talk about some other things that Sikh Council has been involved in.
Okay.
I know recently there's been issues around mixed marriages, and whether the Anand Karaj ceremony should be allowed for a non-Sikh marrying a Sikh. And there's been some recent coverage of that in the press and radio programs and discussions and so on. Now from the Akal Takht, my understanding is that there's not a hukamnama as such, but there's a kind of advisory note which discourages the Anand Karaj ceremony taking place between a Sikh and a non-Sikh. And the reasoning behind that being really only two parties who are Sikh and believe in the Guru Granth Sahib, only for that instance would an Anand Karaj have any meaning. If one party doesn't believe in the Guru Granth Sahib, it kind of makes it a meaningless ceremony. Now, the Sikh Council UK has, based on that guidance from the Akal Takht, issued some guidance in the UK. Can you tell us a little bit about what that guidance is?
Okay. Well, there's a couple of points. Firstly, the guidance actually hasn't been issued in its final form. So in terms of where we are, what we're actually doing is we're still in a kind of a consultative phase where we're trying to, where we're engaging Gurdwara communities and understanding what their concerns might be. So it's still fluid, and it will be finalised at shortly.
Right.
In terms of kind of what we're trying to achieve and perhaps some of the sentiments of it, there is thinking around requiring people who want to have an unencouraged wedding to certainly not sign something whereby they're converting to Sikhism. That's not the objective, and it's actually not in line with the traditions of other
Sikhism.
Sikhs.
Yeah, yeah.
But actually, some of the conversations that have been had and some of the sentiments that have been expressed are actually quite progressive and are actually quite impressive. So there's an understanding that just because you're born into a Sikh family doesn't necessarily mean you perhaps understand what the Anand ceremony is about.
Yeah.
And there's an understanding and there's a desire to maintain our tradition of welcoming and of being open and of being ultimately true to a founding element of Sikhism, which is, we are colourblind. We don't judge people by colour. There's no caste, there's no race. So we have to maintain that openness. And in some of the discussions that have been had, the sentiments that are often expressed is that we should have confidence in the faith of Sikhism and the principles of Sikhism. I mean, you yourself have taught Sikhism at school, and as you often say yourself, what's really impressive and what often surprises people who are being taught about Sikhism is that it's always striking how surprised people are at how open, how fair, how egalitarian the Sikh faith is. So we should have that confidence, I think, when we talk about mixed marriages. So I think the approach we're hoping to take, and certainly the views that have been raised, is that there should be an act of making a promise for not perhaps just people who are from outside the Sikh faith, even perhaps people who are born into the Sikh faith but maybe don't understand it.
Yeah.
And the promise is to actually understand, take some time and read some material, which hopefully, perhaps we can even provide ourselves, which just lays out the principles of Sikhi, and asks people to understand and read and to be open to what the philosophy is, and have the confidence that when they read that, they will take on board and they will begin a journey of understanding more about Sikhism. A second element to this promise would be that we would actually ask people that you are entering a marriage, and over time, as you have children, you should also expose your children to these key underlying principles. So that's kind of where the guidance is heading. Like I said, it's not been finalised, it's still in consultation, and these things can be tricky. But the sentiments that have been expressed at the meetings where I've been, again, they're actually quite impressive and certainly quite progressive.
And I think it's important to say the Sikh Council is not in any authority to make any decisions as such, and it's not claiming to do so. But it's guidance that's there to be helpful given the situation that's current, and given the guidance that's come from Akal Takht.
Absolutely. So we have to take account of the guidance that comes from the Akal Takht.
Yeah.
We also have to interpret that guidance within the context that we live in here in Britain. And as you rightly point out, the Sikh Council is a forum, it's a collective of organisations and people, so there's no compulsion for anyone to follow that. It is simply guidance and how we, it's our view and our interpretation of what people should try and do.
I want to just think a little bit about the process through which rules and guidance and laws are made and then issued.
Okay.
So if we look in Parliament, for example, in the UK, there's normally a process that goes something like there's an issue that needs to be addressed, or there's a policy that a party that's in power wants to implement. Then they go out to consultation to get views. Those views are then taken on board. There's an early version of a bill. the bill gets drafted and redrafted and renegotiated, it goes through Parliament, and by the time the bill becomes an act, it's been through a number of stages, and then it's issued.
Right.
So if we compare that kind of process to the sort of process that in Sikhism in general we have for something like mixed marriages, in your view, how do the two compare, and what can each type of process learn from the other?
Well, actually the process you just walked through in terms of how our Parliament works, it's very similar to the approach we adopt, because it's tried, it's tested, it's a consultative approach, and it's inclusive of all the various views. You have to allow people an opportunity to feed into the process.
Right.
And with everything I've just said around the Sikh Council not being in a position to kind of authorise or to dictate some things, the Sikh Council very much so operates along the same principles. So issues are raised. I think you do clearly get a feel of what's kind of pressing and what's not. And much like in Parliament, we have several committees who specialise in certain issues, and these committees are headed by people who have some experience professionally of their subject matter. Many of these people are actually quite impressive, and what they often do is they draft a first draft of what we think the position is. It's looked at across the Sikh Council. It then goes out to consultation, and it's an iterative process whereby both the wider community and people with perhaps more insightful knowledge or experience feed into it, and what comes out at the other end is something that's been agreed on, that's been looked at by everyone.
And it's kind of tried and tested to some extent.
Absolutely,
right?
absolutely.
And that's got to be, when you're talking to people who've got influence, parliamentarians, whether they're in government or not, it's got to be crucial, hasn't it, that you're presenting something credible, you're taken seriously, and what you're showing them is a meaningful piece of work that they can do something with and have a meaningful discussion on, rather than perhaps just turning up and not really being coherent about what you're saying. That's got to be a basic thing.
Absolutely, and again, the feedback I've got, because we have actually taken groups from the executive committee. We have held meetings with political parties and with politicians, and I purposely take people with me, and I give their CVs, and their CVs always say, this is what they do professionally, and this is what they've done in terms of the Sikh community, and I always send a little pack across which talks about the Sikh Council and the democratic nature of it. Talks about the constitution and some of the policies we have, and
all of that's got to look credible, hasn't it?
It certainly has an impact. It demonstrates that we are credible. It demonstrates that actually we do represent genuine people. There's one of the challenges for the Sikh community has been self-appointed leaders who perhaps don't represent anyone, but appoint themselves. Usually they are well-meaning and absolutely quite competent, but you need that mandate and you need that process.
And that organisational setup, so that it's not just a single person.
Absolutely.
Okay, good. So, I mean, in terms of, we've had a good understanding, I think, about where the Sikh Council is coming from, how it operates. We've talked about the importance of the parliamentary process and getting Sikhs involved in politics. Mixed marriage as an example. And I'm just wondering about this process through which Parliament considers matters. Another controversial topic that's been on the table recently is the issue of caste. And it's an emotive subject, and I know recently there's been a lot of high emotion around it, but I simply really want to deal with the legislative process and what's happening on this issue around caste. Now you, in the role that you have, can you just from a factual point of view tell us what's the issue and what is it that Parliament is considering regarding caste?
So the issue, and in terms of the bit of legislation that's been impacted, it's basically the Equalities Act. And the Equalities Act has various characteristics that it defines and it calls protective characteristics against which people cannot be discriminated against. Not in every environment, so it only applies to employment, it applies to education and services.
So currently, what are these some of the protective?
Well, they cover the kind of obvious things, so race, religion, your kind of sexual orientation, etc., etc. Yeah. But there is a bit in there which potentially allows, I believe it's the race and religion one, to be extended to caste.
Right.
And what's happening and where we are is that there has been a lobby to move that caste legislation, that caste clause, to basically activate it. So that bit of legislation, so the Equalities Act covers discrimination on grounds of caste in the environments of employment, education and provision of services.
And there is lobbying that's taken place,
yes,
to add caste,
yes,
as one of the things that you cannot discriminate against,
yes,
in employment and
yes,
services and
yes,
procurement and so on. Okay.
Yes. And in terms of our position, and in terms of kind of what we're involved with, everything the Sikh Council does, has to be dictated by Sikh teachings.
Yeah.
Caste doesn't have a place in Sikhism. The founding principle of Sikhism is that there is no caste. Ritual purity, caste, any kind of caste, however you define it, has no place in Sikhism. And that's something that we are absolutely clear on, and it's something it's that sentiment that we're absolutely keen on promoting. The challenge has been the proposed legislation, the way it's how it's come about, and we're concerned it might actually be counterproductive. So what the Sikh Council is doing is actually asking for some time for there to be further consultation, and part of that consultation is asking, is legislation the right approach, or is there an educational element to it? The particular points of concern that we have relate to, firstly, the definition of caste. The way the legislation has been written, it suggests that the Sikh faith accepts or practices caste, which.
So let me just be clear there.
Yes.
This is being suggested in the current form of proposed legislation?
Yes, there's a working definition, and the working definition it's a slightly bizarre definition, and it seems to cover just about everything, both faith and cultural practices, and then it also the way it's worded, it suggests it links the Sikh faith. It actually has Sikhism in the definition.
So I'll come on to in a second how did that happen. Okay. But we should be absolutely clear.
Yes.
There is no casteism in Sikhism.
Absolutely not.
And the Sikh Council's position is that should be reflected in any legislation, should it be required.
Yes.
Currently there's a proposed, it's not legislation yet, there's an early proposal for legislation which seems to suggest that there is a caste element in Sikhism. And obviously Sikhs are not happy about that, and the Sikh Council isn't happy about that, and something needs to be done about that. How did that position arise? How have we arrived at a point where legislation has been proposed in which the sentiments of Sikhi and Sikhs as a people have been implicated with the word caste? How did that happen?
Right. So what's happened is rightly so. There are a number of organisations who campaign for castes who are discriminated against. And what happened was, before the last general election, the last government actually commissioned a report to look into, does caste discrimination exist, and if so, where, what form, and what's the scale of the problem. And that report came out quite recently. And it quite rapidly led to a House of Lords debate. And there was, in that process, there was a distinct lack of consultation with Sikhs. So it went to the House of Lords. There was just a debate on it, on whether or not the Equality Act should be amended to include caste. And based on this study, there was a strong vote in favour of actually activating that clause and bringing it into
because I guess of the way it was presented.
Because of the way it was presented, and now what's happened is, because there's been such a strong vote in favour by the House of Lords, the Commons has to they have to look at it. So there's a vote happening on this soon, and we've been feeding into that process. And one of the issues has been about the lack of consultation with the Sikh community. I mean, there was two Sikh organisations were contacted, and they quite rightly took the position of Sikhs don't accept caste.
There is no caste in Sikhism, right?
So they said that, and they said, this shouldn't impact us. However, quite naively, what that did do was it left us out of the process. So by the time the House of Lords debate was had, we weren't engaged in the process of writing that up and of the debates that took place. So when the House of Lords debate took place, that's the point where the Sikh Council had to sit up.
When did the House of Lords?
So the House of Lords happened. It was literally a matter of weeks ago.
Right.
So not that long ago.
So if we think about that for a minute, we've arrived at a point now where a House of Lords debate has happened on a working definition that seems in a proposed document to become legislation, in which Sikhs have had next to zero input. Perhaps we weren't too clever about it. And what's the consequence of that? I mean, is it a potentially dangerous consequence for Sikhs, or is it more around the danger of unintended consequences?
Well, our objections actually do focus on that. So not only are we objecting to the working definition, and in fact we actually find it quite offensive that it suggests Sikhs practice some kind of caste structure. Our main objective is around the consequences of this kind of legislation. Now, again, we absolutely agree with the sentiments. There should be no discrimination on caste. In fact, there is no place for caste identities, caste thinking within Sikhism. And traditionally, caste hasn't been a feature of our lives here in Britain. It's not part of our national shared values, and we want to keep it that way. And our concern is actually based on precedent, based on India. So in India, they introduced caste legislation, well-meaning, well-intentioned, and it was designed to protect the untouchable classes. From discrimination, and to give them access to education and other opportunities. Clearly, it was well intended, but actually, what's happened since that legislation came into play is that caste has now suddenly become a feature of political debate. So what you found is there are now political parties and political campaign groups that are defined by caste. And that, for us, is a concern. What we do not want is for caste to be formally somehow recognised here in the UK, and that somehow triggers a process whereby people start defining themselves, or they start viewing their life experiences through the prism of caste. And that's the bit we're concerned about. Sikhs have made huge progress in terms of ridding ourselves of what really is a cultural practice that stems from the subcontinent in Punjabi culture. Has no place in the Sikh faith, but clearly there are elements of cultural issues here. And we have to rid ourselves of that. And we're just concerned that if you start recognising it and monitoring it and measuring it, it becomes a feature of how people identify themselves, of how they try and engage with...
It's a hook on which they can start hanging all sorts of things, isn't it?
Absolutely. So we're not against the sentiments, and actually we're absolutely for government doing something. We think there is an issue and government should get involved, but we don't think legislation is the right approach.
Okay. And if, going back to the earlier discussion we had around the lack of influential representation of Sikhs, be it in Parliament or what have you, if we did have that representation, you know, a lot of people like to compare the Sikh faith with Judaism.
Yes.
And how Jewish people in England
Yes.
Do have a certain level of influence. There are MPs who are Jewish. They've been as a community longer in the UK. If something equivalent to this caste issue was going to be proposed for the Jewish community, how would it have been different?
Well, actually, funny enough, we don't even need to look at the Jewish community. And the reason I say that is because the reason we're dealing with the caste issue at a point where it is because this is a legacy of how we used to operate. So the process started before the Sikh Council was fully mobilised and it was fully engaged and it had started to build its networks. So this actually demonstrates how desperately we need to get ourselves organised. But in that intervening period, we have implemented huge changes in terms of how we talk to parties, how we talk to the civil service. And in the last few months alone, there are areas of policy that government's looking at. And now someone picks up the phone and they contact the Sikh Council and they say, this is a bit of legislation we're thinking about. You know, is this something you want to be involved in the consultation for? So that process has already begun.
Yeah. Which is fantastic.
Yes.
But my point is, if we had some, frankly, Sikh MPs,
yes,
more of them,
yeah.
How would the process be different? Would it be a case of legislation like this, which is being proposed, before it was being proposed, those Sikh MPs would have a say,
yes.
just by virtue of the fact that there are some of them,
yeah.
there would be a bit of a break
yes.
in the process
yeah.
to do the check.
No, absolutely.
As well as engaging with people like the Sikh Council.
Absolutely, and that's where the whole, you know, you've hit the nail on the head. That's where the representation issue is. The fact that there are not many Sikh MPs means that these things can happen without it having to cross the desk of that Sikh MP.
Yeah.
If there are more Sikh parliamentarians, and not just parliamentarians, even people who who work as staff within the political parties, if there are more Sikhs involved.
And they're learning about how the political process works.
Absolutely, they learn about the political process. They're plugged into what's happening, and when something does occur, they have enough of a relationship with the Sikh community. They have enough knowledge about Sikhism to be able to start influencing things from
There's a setup in place, isn't there?
Indeed, indeed.
Okay, good. So really interesting, points that we've talked about. Moving on a little bit, what do you personally see as some of the key issues for Sikhs moving forward in the British community?
Okay. I mean, I always harp on about representation. For me, the Sikh community is there was a recent adjournment, and it was about the contributions that Sikhs have made to Britain. And all the MPs lots of MPs turned up, lots of very positive statements. And for me, that just highlighted, whilst we have all these successes, we have absolutely very, very little influence politically. We need to get involved politically. We need to get involved with the political parties. And that can be challenging. That can be, we Sikhs currently vote 80% vote for Labour and I think 11% vote Conservative. I don't know how many. I think very few vote Liberal Democrat. For me, that's not a healthy situation. I think the Sikh vote should be fluid. It should be dynamic. It should be based on policies and principles, not on tribalism. And the parties should be working and fighting for the Sikh vote. We are an influential group. There are a number of constituencies where there is that critical mass needed for the Sikhs to be a decisive figure in elections. Yet we're not taken seriously, even in those constituencies.
What is the political parties' take on this? Are they doing anything to attract the Sikh vote?
Again, I think they've always struggled to understand what needs to be done. So of course, Labour has fantastic relationships at the grassroots level. They have, the number of Labour councillors is actually quite impressive. They have long-standing relationships. They've, for a very, very long time, engaged with some of the concerns that Sikh community has around human rights. Labour, Conservatives on the other hand, they too have their relationships, but the relationships have tended not to be as deep as perhaps Labour's have. I think that's reflected in how we vote.
Is it changing, do you think, now?
It is changing. There is a recognition, I think, from both sides of the party, from both parties and the Lib Dems, that the Sikh vote is it's not a block vote, you know.
Yeah.
And there is this growing professional element, British Sikh element. Sikhs actually, out of all the groups that come from the Indian subcontinent, there's been a number of surveys done around how well integrated people feel, how well accepted they feel, how much they feel England is their home. And actually Sikhs are the most integrated group of all the immigrant groups out of the subcontinent. And that's a real big plus, but it's also a negative in that sometimes it means we just have to take everything as it comes.
Yeah.
And I think now the political parties are starting to realise that, you know, Sikhs will vote based on policies and based on other issues, as does everyone else. But perhaps they should have something in place to talk directly to British Sikhs, because there are some very specific things that sometimes challenge the Sikh community.
Yeah. Yeah.
And there's that recognition that something has to be done. I think the creation of the Sikh Council and the appointment of someone like myself, so the creation of my role, is actually quite timely. So I think we did it at the right time when the parties were realising there was a need for change. So, you know, I think over the next 2 years, I think the next general election for me would be the litmus test. Have we achieved what we want to achieve, and are we being taken seriously, and are we being engaged the way we should?
Absolutely. So I think I can't think of a better place to end it than on that point. We've discussed on this Sikh Think Tank programme the Sikh Council UK. Navtej Singh Sangha is the parliamentary liaison person for the Sikh Council. Do look up on the internet the Sikh Council UK.
Yes.
We'll put up the information on the screen. If you're interested in getting involved in politics, national level, local level, whichever party, things are taking place to encourage Sikhs to come forward and be part of the political process. Really enjoyed the discussion with you, Navtej. And on that point, we'll say Vaheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Vaheguru Ji Ki Fateh.